Hello everyone, I'm sure everyone had a really fun weekend with the fights and the Super Bowl. I figured we'd kind of go over the idea of hype train since we just saw one derail in the form of Joe Pyfer. So, unfortunately, he did lose his fight against Jack Hermanson, who showed his veteran status this weekend, and he held out against the first two rounds, which were really dangerous for him. What we got to see exposed is the gas tank, his inability to really handle pressure in fighting off his back foot, and importantly, also the ground game on the bottom if he's the one that's on his back. But with all those things considered, it could still be a learning experience and he could still come up on top in the end. But I wanted to kind of get into the idea of a hype train, what makes a hype train, who is considered a hype train by a lot of the people in the community, or who just might be up and comers who have just been having good favorite matchups. I figured we'll kind of go over all that and we kind of analyze it from here. Now, there's a few things you can kind of do to identify a hype train very early on. A lot of successes against mediocre to hand-picked opponents. That's definitely a factor you can consider into a potential hype train, especially if they're finishing them all in impressive fashion and it's not really warranting the amount of attention they're getting. Second thing is you'll notice more media coverage with them involving social media, going on podcasts, things like that. Not everybody gets that privilege, but when you see someone who's not been there long enough, who's been getting that kind of attention, that's another sign you're getting a potential hype train. Another one you could think of, and this one's not really true, but it seems to be the case more and more because of the UFC's market. If they're from a different nation where they're trying to get more money and tickets from, you will see some of these people get pushed pretty heavily. And Tom Aspinall kind of got that before he got his interim title. Israel Adesanya had a similar thing for that. They were doing it with Conor McGregor 100%. Weili Zhang kinda in some sense, but not really as much as you see women's MMA. But the point is, you will see nationalism and stuff like that kind of connect into it. And the last and most important factor of all, they are untested against the upper echelon of the fight game. So these are people who typically are doing well against unranked opponents, but they gradually build them up to an extent. But then you put them in against top 15, top 10 opponents, and if typically if they can't get past one, that's a good sign right there. They're a hype train. Ian Gary is one of those people who are about to be tested to see if he's a hype train or not. But you can be derailed and you can come back. It doesn't necessarily mean you are a hype train or you've been derailed. These are the factors I consider it, if you ask me. Now, when we get into the whole discussion about potential outliers, I do have an idea behind that. World caliber athletes of sorts, when you think of people like Bo Nickel, who is typically someone who's kind of well renowned nowadays for being a U.S. World Championship gold medalist. You got a guy who's in national championships, and you got people who are Olympic medalists, gold or silver. You got people like Yoel Romero, who did it with wrestling. You got people like Ronda Rousey, who, well, I believe she was gold. You got people like Kara Harrison coming up. People who have high credentials, I feel they are kind of in this weird little skewed area. You can argue the potential of being hype trained, but at the same time, they have reasons that you could believe they'll be decent people in the sport. And for almost all those people I listed, with the exception of Bo Nickel, because it's still too early on, all of them either became champions or top competitors, and the record is pretty high of them succeeding than failing. So I would say if you see someone with those kind of credentials, Alex Pereira was a two-time champion, two weight classes, the only one in history for Glory Kickboxing, and look where he is right now. When you have a high enough resume, I feel that does put you in a weird little spot where you may not be considered a hype train per se, but it's kind of a gray area, if you ask me about that viewpoint. Overall, however, the thing I would say most of all, the way you can find out if someone's a hype train or not is testing them. Not putting them against one particular types of opponent that they've been untested. For people like Israel Adesanya, long in his career, he didn't face good grapplers. He fought mediocre to people with no grappling abilities, mostly strikers, and they failed. You put people who have terrible ground game, Habib Nurmagomedov, almost a lot of people you could think of, add into this category. Those are another people I would say as well that kind of count into this. People who just haven't had well-rounded enough fights and haven't been tested on. Joe Pyfer, for example, he finished almost everybody he's fought against. Never made it to a third belt until now. So sometimes people who are just knocking people out. Francis Ngannou had the same issue until his first fight with Stipe, but heavyweight I feel is a weird outlier because heavyweights and knockouts are kind of a known thing. But honestly, you just gotta test them far enough and see where they go. I mean, Sean O'Malley, definitely one of the biggest hype trains in the world. He got the quickest path to a title. The only one who got it quicker than him was Alex Pereira because of Izzy, but other than him, Conor McGregor, until he fought Chad Mendes, was basically in the same rope of, well, I got easy people, for the most part, hand-picked and kind of sculpt forward. So you really just got to watch out for those kind of things and see where the people you either like or dislike and where they go. I say it by now, if you haven't fought at least 2 to 3 people before you get a title shot, oh, you're 100% being fast-tracked for a title shot or for a top prime spot. If they're making you avoid certain people, that's another hint. You got Shavkov. It's a perfect example of that. And you got Hazmat Shemaev, all these people. Ironically, there's always these Dagestani Russian types that people kind of keep away. And Marab is kind of that for certain people in his division too. But overall, I know it's not a big video about this, but I figured we kind of point the thing out. Joe Pyfer needs to fight someone like maybe the loser of Paulo Costa versus Whitaker, or maybe give him the winner of or loser of Coney Brunage versus Bo Nickel. Kind of test him the grounds there. Give him someone slightly just outside the top 15. If you want to give him the top 15, give him someone right at 15. I don't remember who it exactly has right now, but for now, that's my viewpoint about it. You guys let me know what you think, and I'll talk to you all later.